Hey guys, it's Amber from Notable Ink. Welcome back. Today I'm jumping outside of the color families and mixing up my pink inks to create this beautifully detailed floral arrangement. This video is part of the Altenew Build a Flower Hawaiian Coral release and blog hop. Be sure to use my link down below to join us on the hop for a chance to win a gift card. Here's Build a Flower Hawaiian Coral, and it has this gorgeous bloom. It has 5 layers for the large part of the bloom, 2 for the center, and then 4 layers for the leaves. Now, one thing to remember about layering stamps is you're not obligated to use all of the layers. You can decide to use the outline or not, or also use the full solid layer or not. You also don't have to use all of the detail layers. Totally up to you, and it's fun to play around with it and get different looks. As always, inside of the trifold, you have loads of inspiration, so lots of different color choices and color recommendations, as well as it also gives you an idea of how you can arrange the leaves and the flowers if you're kind of getting stuck there. On the back, of course, you have your layering guide, which is going to help you layer it together. Though I will tell you, Altenew has perfected layer stamps to the point where they're so easy to line up now. The first thing I want to do with my layer stamp projects is pick my colors. So I have the swatch cards that come with the oval ink sets from Altenew. I have Cherry Blossom here, and I'll be using Pink Diamond in Rubelite. From the Red Cosmos set, I've pulled out Frosty Pink in Coral Berry. And from the Tea Party set, I'll use Pink Pearl and Coral Bliss. Now, I may or may not use all of these colors, but I kind of wanted to pull some out and get an idea of what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to kind of jump over the color families and use a mix of pinks. Now, I don't end up using the Cherry Blossom. That ends up being way too pink. What I use instead is Blush, which is from the Red Sunset family. I have a piece of A2 Neenah Classic Crust Solar White 80-pound cardstock. So this is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, and I have my mini Misty here. I'll start by stamping the outline layer in obsidian pigment ink. So this is my go-to black ink. I love it. The only thing that I don't use it for is coloring with artist or alcohol markers because it will smear with those. But otherwise I use it for everything else because it's a deep dark black and you get really fine lines with it. So I just love it. I'm going to flip my cardstock around and stamp it again because I do want 2 blooms on my card. Now, you don't have to use black for your outline. You can also use one of the pinks, whether you decide to use one of the lighter pinks or a darker pink, totally up to you. I have the most solid layer here, and be sure to condition your stamps, especially your solid stamps. I'm going to rub it with my palm so that the surface of the stamp is completely cloudy. Once it's cloudy, it's going to grab onto the ink and your ink isn't going to pull up. If your stamp is still shiny on the surface, then your ink is going to pull up into beads. It's going to bead up and you're not going to get a smooth impression when you stamp. So I'll just hold it there for a second and you can see with the conditioning of the stamp how smooth that is. So I stamped the one flower with the solid stamp. Now I've switched over to the second layer stamp. So this is just a little bit more detail on this stamp, and I've stamped that in Pink Pearl. For the second flower, I omitted that solid stamp, and I'm going to go right to that second layer with Frosty Pink. So this is going to be a lighter flower. I love to omit that most solid layer because it leaves those bright white highlights, which is something that I really like. And the only way to do that, to preserve those white areas, is to omit that solid layer. So here I'm just writing myself some notes because I don't want to forget what my layers were, especially when I go to write my blog post for you guys. But if you are stamping and you want to remember what your color combinations are, then I highly recommend you write it on a scrap piece of paper and just keep it in your stamp packaging so that you know what color combinations you like so that you can recreate it, especially if you're using colors that aren't in the same color family. Now here I have the third layer of the stamp and I'm stamping this in Blush. You can't really see too much of a difference, so I'm going to go ahead and stamp it twice. You can see a little bit of detail in person, very hard for you guys to see on camera, but I'll go ahead and stamp this flower in Blush as well. So far the only color on this flower is the Frosty Pink layer, and so I'm going to add Blush to this. And that's going to warm up this bloom a little bit. It's hard for you to see the detail here, but it does warm it up. The Frosty Pink is a cool pink, whereas the Blush is a warm pink. And so it just adds just a touch of warmth. I'm going to go in for the third layer on that first flower. So this has frosty pink and pink pearl so far. It also had a little bit of blush on there, and this is coral berry. This is going to make this pop right off the page. So that high contrast between the lighter pinks and the coral berry is just gorgeous. Now here, this is a much lighter flower because it didn't have the base coat of a pink. It had the white. So I'm just going to take off a little bit of that coral berry and do a partial stamping so that it's not too overwhelming. I love the way that looks. I do want a little bit more coral berry, so I'm going to lightly tap the stamp with the coral berry, and then I'll take some off with the microfiber cloth again, just to get a little bit more color, but not too much. I don't want to overdo it. Next, I'll move on to the last layer for the bloom, aside from the centers, and I'm going to take a look at the layering guide to make sure I have this lined up appropriately. So since this is a smaller stamp, it doesn't exactly line up with the outer edges of the full bloom like the other layers did. So I just want to take a look at this and make sure I have it right. There's lots of areas within this stamp where you can see match up with that black outline that I have. So still super easy to line this up. So here I'm thinking about what color I want to use. I had a hard time deciding. I picked ruby red and that was totally the wrong color, you guys. This is the lighter flower that I have here, and ruby red is such a strong color. I should have gone with either coral berry or heartbeat. It's just, it overwhelms the whole bloom. So that went from my favorite flower to my least favorite. I was so sad. So here I'm putting on a layer of heartbeat to see if that will just kind of tone it down a little bit. And it really doesn't. It's just too late. So I went ahead and stamped the other flower with a heartbeat for that layer, and I'm moving on to the centers. I'll stamp the first layer with buttercream cristae ink and the second layer with warm sunshine. And both of those colors are from the Summer Afternoon ink family, but of course you could pick different yellows as well. Here's a close-up so you can see all of those layers, and I'll have all of the colors that I use listed on my blog post as well. I die cut the flowers with the coordinating dies that come with the Build-A-Flower set, and I used one of the sentiments from the set and stamped that in obsidian pigment ink. Here I've stamped out several of the leaves. I'll stamp the first most solid layer in frayed leaf. Then I'll do the next detail layer with forest glades. I'll stamp some of them in forest glades and some of them with evergreen. Whoops, fortunately that didn't get on the leaves. And I'm using two different colors because I wanted some leaves to be darker and some leaves to be a little bit lighter. It just gives you a little more interest on your card when they're different colors. I did not use all of the layers of the leaves. I just used the outline, the most solid layer, and one of the detail layers, just to keep things simple. So here I've started arranging them. I don't have anything glued down yet. I wanted to get an idea of how I wanted them arranged, and I felt like I was just missing something. Sometimes I get a little antsy with too much white space, so I grabbed the window sphere die, and I'm going to die cut this from white cardstock. Now this will just die cut a window in your panel, but I wanted a separate piece that I could adhere to my card. So I have a circle stacking die that is slightly larger than the window sphere die, and I'm just getting those lined up. I'll tape those to the cardstock and then run those through my die cutting machine. So rather than having just a window, I have a die cut piece. Here I have the Altenew 2-in-1 precision glue pen. It has a ballpoint tip, and when you press down on the ballpoint, the glue starts to flow. So I'll just get this adhered lightly to my paper here. Now, you can either have a permanent adhesion or temporary adhesion. If you allow the glue to dry and get tacky, it'll be temporary. But if you adhere your piece while the glue is wet, then it'll have a permanent adhesion. So here I'm just adding a little bit of glue to each one of those spines so that everything is adhered once I trim off the excess of the window sphere. I'll just trim this off with my long scissors, and then I'll get the flowers and the leaves arranged and popped up. I'll adhere some directly to the card and pop up some of the elements so that there's greater dimension on the card. This looks nice, but I'm totally missing my black ink spray. So the new Altenew woodless watercolor pencils have replaced my favorite jet black ink spray for splatter. And I wanted some really fine splatter this time. So I have a number 4 round brush, and it's wet. I've gone ahead and wet it, and I'm just wetting the tip of this jet black woodless pencil, and I'm just splattering it on straight from the pencil. Now, if you get your brush really good and wet and you rub it against the pencil, then you can just tap the brush like you normally would, or you can flick it straight from the pencil like I did here. So that gives me some really fine splatter. If I wanted larger splatter, then I would have used an 8, a 10, or even a 12 round brush. There's 24 colors in this set, and it's a small container, so it can sit right on my desk caddy and gives me the opportunity for 24 different colors worth of ink splatter, which is a lot easier to store than the ink sprays that I had been using for splatter previously. So super excited about that. Here's a close-up of the finished card so you can see some of that blush pink that you see in there. It's kind of more of the corally peach color there, which I think adds a really nice effect along with the cooler pink. So definitely when you're layer stamping, remember that you don't have to stay with just one color family. Jump outside of that color family and try different color combinations. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like and subscribe button down below if you haven't already, and hop along with us. Leave a comment along the blog hop for a chance to win a gift card to shop Altenew. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you real soon with more inspiration.